Welcome back, housemates. It's day 6 of the Advent calendar. Yesterday we talked about claiming and defending territory, chrysalids and zombies, and class roles. Today we'll talk about time pressure and aggression, sectoids and gatekeepers, and engagement ranges.
The time has come to reclaim our world. Welcome back, Commander.
Incoming transmission.
Day 6, strategy, time pressure, and aggression. So we're going to talk about time pressure and aggression on both the strategic and tactical levels. First, on the strategic level, the things that apply time pressure to you are the Avatar project primarily, because it threatens the end of the game. Supply drops, because you want those goodies as soon as possible. And dark events, because obviously they can do horrific things to you, although some dark events won't actually affect you on the strategic level. Economic need. You need resources to power your research, to build new equipment, most likely, and to generally improve your game. And soldier recovery rate, because it will take a couple days for soldiers to come back, and the only place you can affect that is on the strategy level. So how do you combat these pressures? Well, first you're going to need to claim and defend your territory, like we talked about in the previous missions, to set yourself up to take out those black sites and to increase your economic income. You're going to need to use personnel assignments wisely to decrease the time it takes for you to research or your soldiers to recover, or even perhaps to expand your ability to claim and defend territory. You're going to need to research things that help you combat the time pressure. Better weapons and equipment are a simple one, as they allow you to take on missions more effectively, possibly cut down on your soldier hospital time, and in general just make you more effective. You're going to want to multitask. If the supply drops in a place where a mission is, then you can cut down on travel time between zones by tackling both of those missions together. Possibly not the optimal mission target for you, but since it allows you to save a good bit of time not running around the map, it could definitely be worth it. And good prioritization. Simply knowing what is going to be most effective for you to do is going to help you make the right decision when it comes to how to spend your time. On the tactical level, you're going to be pressured by the objective timer, whether that's an assault or a defend. There's going to be time pressure in almost every map, guaranteed. I think the developers learned their lesson from XCOM Enemy Unknown, and they won't let you skulk around the map forever unless you've already achieved your primary objective. Loot timers, we've seen these to be about 3 rounds. Likely it's always 3 rounds, and the loot is really good. So that's going to put some heavy pressure on you to make a dash with a soldier out into some position where an enemy died. And generally when enemies die, they're surrounded by other enemies. So that's going to be a good bit of tactical pressure, forcing you out there to get those really valuable goodies. And positioning. So you're always, when you're engaging enemies, you can always increase your combat advantage through good positioning. And so there's always going to be pressure to find better positions. If you're engaging head to head and you can move to a flank position, then that can greatly increase the damage, your chance to hit, everything, since it increases crit chance and it removes their cover. Generally, not all enemies use cover, and positioning isn't as effective against those enemies that don't. You're also going to need to abuse the following to help you out against the time pressure that you'll face in the tactical map. Concealment. That initial concealment phase is going to let you rush out and get closer to your objectives, or position yourself better, or ambush enemy squads and take them down quickly to give yourself some breathing room. Squad sight's going to help a lot because the sharpshooter can remain stationary and pick and choose their targets. Effectively, they can only support one. They only get one action, right? Only one attack when they're at squad sight range. But they can support wherever they are needed, which allows you to be a bit more aggressive with your other units because they have backup at least once. Once the sharpshooter is acted, obviously you lose that advantage, so they can't really be in two places at once, but they can be all over the map until they pick a spot to shoot. Explosives are going to help you take out enemy cover. They're going to help you damage groups of enemies at once, and so they can save you a lot of time when dealing with weaker squads of multiple enemies, and let you move through that map much more quickly, especially because exposed enemies are very easy to cut down with other troopers. Explosives are incredibly effective, or really probably too effective in enemy unknown. If you ever abused them, then you could have a really, really easy game. Hacking is going to help a lot to relieve time pressure, as it can convert obstacles into advantages, and it can even give you extra troops, which means extra actions. If you convert a mech, not only can that mech start blowing up your enemies and soaking enemy fire, but the rest of your squad is free to do other things than engage and can just simply move past towards the objective they need or towards the better positions. And lastly, you're going to have to judge on an individual basis all of the abilities in the game, and they can go either way. Zombies and poison and mind control, all of these things are going to work against you and create lots of additional pressure on you. Perhaps the Viper's ability to constrict someone is going to require that you target down that Viper as quickly as possible. Whereas your own abilities can relieve that pressure and cause you to be even more effective in shorter periods of time. So try and keep in mind all the abilities in play and available to you to optimally navigate the mission pressure.
Incoming transmission.
Day 6, Tactics, Sectoids, and Gatekeepers. Sectoids and Gatekeepers are the only revealed psychic enemies so far. You can expect High Will, you can expect Psi minions in XCOM 2, and you can expect these enemies to require your immediate attention, likely of multiple squad members, if not your whole squad. Let's take a look at the Sectoid first. This thing looks kind of like the Joker to me, with its creepy, skinless grin. It's the basic Psi-wielding enemy. It's capable of mind control and creating Psi zombies at least. Probably another trick or two. Maybe those develop over time, maybe not. It's a lot tougher than the previous Sectoids, and it's moved up the ranks, with the Advent taking the bottom of the totem pole. The Sectoids are now significantly more dangerous, which I think is a lot of fun. You can expect from these guys cautious behavior. They'll kind of lurk around in the back, most likely, to take advantage of their relatively disruptive actions. You can expect to lose or have stolen your own actions and squad mates through varieties of nasty mental conditions. And you can expect them to apply significant pressure on you to engage them, often from behind a meat shield of Advent soldiers. The psychic powers are much harder to resist than conventional firepower, and it's going to create a lot of need to kill, lest your own troops turn against you, or 25% of your firepower is disoriented or stunned, or other terrible things. So you can counter the Sectoids. Ambush works just as well on Sectoids as it does on most other enemies. Overwhelming them is going to be the general tactic, especially pretty much against all Psi-powered enemies. You're going to need to bring multiple troops in case one of them is disabled or turns against you. And that generally means, especially if one turns against you, the best tactic possible is simply to kill the mind-controlling alien. And you're going to need a lot of troops available to wipe one of those out quickly, because they're generally quite tough. If their action turns out to be ineffective, like they try and mind control you and it doesn't work, or one of your non-combat, like your specialist, is disoriented but he was planning on hacking anyway, then you can go ahead and ignore them for that round and clean up their bodyguard, as their effectiveness at applying pressure really depends on how effective their action turned out. And with psi powers, it's always kind of a gamble who's going to, if you're going to get an effect or not. Lastly, cover destruction is going to be your friend when it comes to focusing them down and exposing either their bodyguards to quickly mop them up so you can overwhelm the sectoid, or exposing the sectoid itself for an easy snipe so that you can then deal with the bodyguards. But you can expect the sectoids to be a pain in your butt throughout the early game, possibly show up en masse in the late game, but it does seem they show up relatively, or in small numbers early on in the game. The Gatekeepers are brutal looking psi-equipped flying brain tanks with powerful energy attacks and some sort of psi zombie field. They look kind of like Krang from the Ninja Turtles cartoon, and they remind me of the Legion boss from the Castlevania series, especially with the ability to create lots of zombies. So these guys, you can guess less about them than the sectoids. Particularly, they would have thematically a wide variety of potential attacks and abilities, but I would expect them to kind of replace the cyber disc in the role of flying tank. So you can expect strong defenses, especially when they're turtled up in a little ball of metal covering plates. You can expect deadly non-psi attacks from what we've seen. The heat beam, or whatever it is they use, appears to be quite deadly, though the footage we've seen is clearly set up to show it killing lots of people and resurrecting them as zombies. And you can expect a lot of psi zombies. My guess would be that the Gatekeeper can, just like the sectoid, resurrect dead, Advent, and other enemies as psi zombies just as easily as it can resurrect your people. And it doesn't appear to actually use an action to resurrect the zombies, as we've seen it resurrect 2 zombies immediately after a massive explosive attack. So I'm going to guess it's a field, a zombie creating field, and as it traverses the battlefield, plenty of little psi zombies are going to pop up. So how do you deal with something like that? Strong AoE, strong range damage, strong defenses, and potentially psychic powers. Well, anti-armor attacks. Likely when its armor is open and it's not turtling up, a powerful critical hit focused attack from a sharpshooter or perhaps a concealed ranger will let you deal massive damage to it. But you're going to need to shred it, you're going to need to focus fire, and probably you're going to want to engage at range, because that AoE blast might not be avoidable. And the range attack to look like it, I mean, certainly the range attack is going to be avoidable. Plus, if it has any psi powers, they probably function at medium or short range. And at long range, you'll have more time to deal with the zombies, or more time to ignore the zombies while you deal with the Gatekeeper itself.
Incoming transmission.
Day 6, disposition, engagement range. So, speaking of long-range engagements, let's talk about the various benefits and dangers associated with engaging at various ranges. So, long range, which I'm going to define as the edge of standard rifle range or further, is probably the most beneficial for XCOM operatives. It reduces melee threats, making it unlikely that you'll be whacked by something, and meaning that melee enemies are probably going to waste their turns. Of course, chrysalids since they can spend their turns turning civilians into more chrysalids, might not be wasting their turns. But most other melee units, like a shock lancer, is going to have to run towards you instead of actually hitting you and doing something effective with their turns, giving you more time to deal with whatever threat you choose. At longer ranges, you're less likely to be focus fired by enemies, because the enemies are generally going to have a harder time all attacking the same person. Now, if one person is at long range and everyone else is out of range completely, that changes things. But you can generally expect that not all the enemies will be within range of one of your units, and so they're going to have to spread their fire mostly. And this makes cover destruction, like if they shoot a rocket at you, a little less deadly than it is at other ranges. No one's going to have aim bonuses. I consider this an advantage for you because, in general, XCOM has the highest aim and therefore suffers the least from having no bonuses. And the enemy generally has more units. So since your aim is usually going to be better, and theirs is going to be more numerous, their attacks are, then the lack of aim bonuses generally favors XCOM pretty heavily. Lastly, you're going to have lots of positioning options at this range because it's very unlikely for either side to be able to flank within the turn. So you're going to be pretty safe, and the further away you are from the enemy, it's like ordering a larger pizza. There's just much more area at the long range than there are at the medium and short ranges due to the radius from the enemy you're targeting being larger. So what problems are you going to face at this range? One, your weapon may be out of range. If you're using a shotgun, it could be out of range. If you're using a rifle, you may not be able to target exactly the enemy you want, the same way they can't gang up on you. You may not be able to gang up on them. You're going to have difficulty flanking the enemy. That it works both ways, but it means that your shots aren't going to be horrifically devastating. You can expect a moderate exchange of firepower, and may the best aim win. Your explosives may not reach the enemy. If they could, then you could take care of that flanking difficulty by destroying their cover and exposing them, but you may not be able to effectively use your explosives, or your hacking, or your other abilities. You are quite likely to be out of range of lots of them, and so is the enemy. So it's going to be a kind of mild, weapon-centric firefight at long range, but that generally favors XCOM. So medium range. Medium range is right about when you start to gain aim bonuses, but before those aim bonuses become significant. So at medium range, you may or may not have flanking options, but you can certainly get within flanking options in 2 rounds. You're probably within optimal explosives and ability range for most of your explosives and abilities, which means you're going to be able to blow away enemy cover. You're going to be able to shred things, or all your AoE attacks are going to be available. This is generally your best chance for dealing solid damage without being completely murdered. It's a good range to engage safely groups of enemies, and it is significantly more dangerous than long range, but the trade-offs are worth it as long as you're not outnumbered. It's also a good range to tank. If you know the enemy is going to get some shots off, or they have some really potent abilities that you're not going to be able to avoid, engaging at medium range generally lets you choose who they're going to target. So the problems with medium range are that enemies can focus fire you, because most enemies will be able to range on one target, and if one of your soldiers gets exposed by explosives or cover destruction somehow, then you can expect every enemy on the enemy team to take advantage of that, and a probable death. Enemies are going to be able to flank you, potentially, or reach melee range in the given round, which is bad news. there's a small chance that you are close enough to uncontacted territory to trigger more aliens, or that more aliens will wander into your field of vision. That's pretty slim at long range, still possible, but it becomes much more likely at medium range. And there's going to be fewer viable cover options for you because of your proximity to the enemy and where the enemy can move and still attack within that one turn. You're going to be much more constricted in where you can position people. Lastly, short range. At short range, you're going to find the high risk, high reward combat. There's going to be lots of flanking positions. It might even be impossible to flank. Short range is where the aim bonuses are significant. Include from melee range out to the point where you can hardly miss. You're going to have all your abilities are going to be available. You might be so close that explosives don't really make sense, but pretty much everything is going to be on the table. You can draw high amounts of fire while you're close, which can be a good thing if you're tanking in some manner. Generally, you can dodge tank quite easily by dashing through cover with some units that can take a hit or two or extra dodgy. But only later in the game can you actually physically tank enemies. And of course, by then you probably have to with their high aim, high damage abilities. And short range, your damage potential is going to be outrageous with brutal critical hits from shotguns and flanking positions and all that. However, remember that critical hits are not guaranteed even when flanking, so take that into mind when you're coming up with your battle plan. For the penalties you're going to face there's almost no good positioning against multiple enemies at short range. One of them is going to be able to flank you, one of them probably is going to flank you. And when the enemies flank you, it's a lot more advantageous for them because their units are basically throwaway and yours are not. So if they can sacrifice 3 units to get one flank shot on you that knocks you out of the battle or puts you out of the fight for the next 12 days, then that's pretty much a win for the enemy. You're also going to have a very high chance of triggering additional contacts and having multiple pods gang up on you. So short range is generally the worst place to be unless you're tackling a single enemy and you are fairly certain no other enemies are going to pop up anytime soon. Oftentimes you're forced into short range against things like the Gatekeeper would probably be a likely example, when you simply need to kill it as quickly as possible, and that is the primary consideration. But if you can, fight at medium to long range, maybe a mix. Sharpshooters and specialists at long range. You want your grenadiers in medium range generally so they can use that explosive power. And at short range, I suggest not engaging at short range except in limited, safer scenarios, fewer enemies, or when the enemy moves up on you, then your ranger can engage them at short range off to the side of your squad when you're being flanked by one enemy or something. Alright friends, that's it for day 6. If you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and like this video. If you'd like to see the next advent calendar video as soon as it comes out, please subscribe to my channel. And tomorrow we'll be talking about strategic awareness, the Archon and the Sectopod, and tactical awareness.